Welcome to the Art Against Mental Illness podcast. My name is Alex Lovelace and this is my podcast about the healing powers of art for artists, art lovers, the art curious and anyone with an interest in mental health and well-being. So I heard a story about a guy called Jack. Jack sojourns for the winter to act as a caretaker for a remote hotel in Colorado. He did this to relieve his writer's block, which he kind of achieved, since he ends up having a breakdown and attempting to axe murder his family. Okay, so that's clearly the plot of The Shining, but it helps set the scene for the conversation I want to have around finding space in your life to be creative. It's hard in the busy modern world to find space to be creative. Secluded getaways are tempting and may even not result in murder, and you may have temporarily released yourself from the burden of daily drudgery and improved your mental health in the process, but life always comes rushing back in. For the value of art and creativity to be truly transformative, you have to find some space in your life that is permanent, that is hardwired into your daily or weekly existence. You need to find some time and space to express yourself that's free of responsibilities, distractions, and all the stressful hubbub of the daily grind. I do not consider this an optional part of the art therapy journey. In many ways, it's the most important part, because the act of creation is not a relaxing one if it's crammed in here and there when you can find the time and space. By all means, go for the murder-free artistic retreat, and I'll have more to say on this in future, especially the non-murdering part. But for now, I want to talk about what you do for the rest of your time. Now, I know I said back in episode 1 that bringing your whole self to the artistic act was neither necessary nor even in many cases desirable. But here's the thing, you still need to bring quite a lot of yourself. But more importantly, you generally need to bring just yourself. Unless you're one of those lucky types who can easily shut other people out, that is. At the very least, you need to try and bring some portion of yourself and give that portion of yourself the permission to engage in the creative act with impunity and without obstruction. I want to drill into these elements: impunity, permission, but first, space. By which I mean physical space, although if you can find some creative space while actually in space, that would be perfectly acceptable too. Finding space to create often means you need to find some private space. I recognise that this is going to be difficult for many people. Perhaps you live in a house with a bunch of drunk students, or you have young kids, although there's not a lot of difference between those two. At the very least, you need to find some space that can be rendered distraction-free, for example with headphones. Maybe a local park where you can find a tree to hide under with a sketch pad, or maybe a ukulele. Why is seclusion necessary to being creative? Well, strictly speaking, it's not. But the creative act, in the way that I talk about it, is a solitary process, a monotropic process. What do I mean by that? I mean that you need to give enough of your being to it, your attention, your body. That largely precludes doing anything else other than maybe listening to some music. When I'm painting, I can listen to a podcast or an audiobook, but if I'm writing, I can't listen to anything where I can discern the words. Otherwise, I just can't concentrate. No words of my own will come. Any songs with clearly audible lyrics, particularly hip-hop, I just can't screen them out, so I tend to listen to a lot of death metal because you can't usually hear what they're saying, and probably don't want to anyway. But there are other forms of music you can consider. Like any process, it requires a lot of concentration, like coding or doing your finances or beating someone at pool. Disturbances and distractions will really throw you off your game. And getting back on your game is hard, and maybe you can't. For my day job, I write code, basically programming. It's a really big thing in the tech space that you don't disturb coders in flow. As an aside, coding can be a very creative process, and also lends itself to flow states. I'm going to talk more about flow states in an upcoming episode, but for those who don't know what they are, think of them as trance-like states of mind that you can get into when engaging with something that takes your whole attention. Some calling it being in the zone, total focus. If someone disturbs you while you're in one of these states, not only is it annoying, it's a bit like knocking a train off its tracks. It can't continue. And it's going to take a bunch of heavy lifting to get it back on its tracks before it can even get moving again. So much time and momentum is lost, so much time is wasted, and it annoys the crap out of the person in the zone, in this example, a coder. And what for? So you could ask them if they remembered to send some pointless email or whatever? No. There's an understanding in technology businesses that actually respect their coders, that you do not disturb them, not because they're highly strung, although they often are, but because it's bad for productivity. And it's usually a manager, the people ultimately responsible for productivity, that do the disturbing, since the other coders know better. It seems a bit silly to do something so damaging to productivity, not to mention the damage to staff morale. From a therapeutic perspective, flow states are like gold dust. We'll come back to the concept of productivity as relates to the creative journey, but suffice to say that being productive is not a necessary prerequisite to being a happy creative, and frequently has an entirely negating effect on the therapeutic value of art. However, being immersed and relaxed is extremely important, and disturbances are equally hard to recover from, and often knock you so far off track you can't get back on again. But this is not about slowing you down. It's not the productive track that matters here, it's the psychological track. It's about how much is lost in that little disturbance in terms of the calming power of the creative act. So let's assume that you found a quiet corner, or even total isolation, alone on an island in the middle of the Pacific maybe. Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel like you're justified in being in that space? Like you deserve to be there? Do you have permission? This is not a minor point. Maybe those around you are giving you the space, but are you giving yourself the space? It seems in the modern world, in the West at least, you're always supposed to be doing something. Every moment must be lived, to the max. This has not always apparently been the case. It's generally believed that those in hunter-gatherer tribes, both of antiquity and existing remote tribes, only tend to work for 3 or 4 hours a day. The rest of the time is spent chilling. These days, if you're not actually doing, everyone seems to feel like they need to look like they're doing. We fill up our schedules, work long hours, play hard, and you work 27 hours a day in servitude to demanding sprogs who, at any age, seem to think that your free time or headspace must always have them residing in it. Whether such responsibility is real or not, whether the demands you face are self-imposed or just life, finding space, physical or psychological, can sometimes seem impossible. I think people frequently find this situation claustrophobic, disempowering, and constantly stressful. This can lead to bad places. Humans need respite, not 10 minutes snatched while the toddler tries to hospitalise themselves in the back garden, not that faintly uncomfortable date with your other half, not time in front of the TV only half paying attention while you doom scroll and answer Snapchats. All of that is a different flavoured version of the same slog. No, humans need rest, true rest. And failure to get this will inevitably result in decline in mental health. Sustained over long periods of time, this can lead to very dark places indeed. So maybe you do just need an undisturbed cuppa in front of the TV or a spliff under a summer sky, but since you're here, I'll assume that you achieve your kicks by letting the creative juices flow. And just like those other activities, you need to find that space, proper space. But once you get there, how often do you feel guilty, twitchy and uncomfortable? I think people feel more guilty in front of an easel than they would in front of the TV. Maybe you do need to get permission from someone else. Do that if you need to. And if the kids can't be trusted to leave you alone, make sure that you can arrange for someone else to keep them caged or whatever is needed to constrain them. But did you also give yourself permission? How often are you only half there, feeling like you should be somewhere else, doing something else? But the kids aren't stopping you, you are. When really is the right time to check out? If you attempt to suffice with some snatched time here and there, then those moments will frequently not arise, and when they do, you're likely not to be able to achieve the required headspace. If you're serious about building art into your life, then you need to be more purposeful about this. It's best to create some time in your schedule, preferably at the same time every day, or whichever days of the week make sense, and book these out. Arrange with anyone concerned that you'll be completely out of commission for that time. No questions asked. Not best efforts. Not unless something comes up. That time must be sacrosanct and respected, especially by you. Find some space where others can't easily barge in and own it. After that, it's down to you. Lean in and relax. You'll feel the difference. The benefits are transformational. I have the hours between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m, at least 5 out of 7 days a week blocked out for this. I'm often very wound up and stressed from my day job, and this is how I wind down. My family knows what happens when I can't get this time. I don't just get grumpy and petulant. This is not, I must have my man time. If I don't make this space in my schedule, I simply stop functioning. My mental health starts declining almost immediately, and I get worse and worse until very bad things happen. This time for me is all but prescribed. And it's considerably more effective than either therapy or medication, and believe me, I know, having been prescribed both multiple times. Don't get me wrong, that stuff has helped, to one degree or another at least, but not nearly as much as my creative headspace does. It's important to remember that what you produce in that time is only peripherally important. Back from my mantra-like obsession with process, see episode 2, what you do, the quality of that time, matters way more than what you produce, or how productive or effective you are. Quality time spent doing something you love is worth way more than anything you might make anyway. And I would argue that what you learn when you fail to make something great is just as valuable as producing stuff that you're already good at producing. It's all part of the process, so it all matters. So to your homework. I want you to find that regular headspace. I want you to go look at your routine, your calendar or whatever, and I want you to carve out some time to make that creative space. And you should go and agree with whoever needs to agree with that and set the ground rules. No ifs, no buts, no guilt, no disturbance. And if you already have such time, then I simply want you to reflect on it next time you're in that space. Simply remind yourself of why it's so vital and magical. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, I'd love for you to support me by hitting a like button and following me on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Your support helps me reach more listeners so that I can continue bringing you the content that you love. Don't forget to leave a review and share this episode with everyone that you know that might find it helpful or valuable.